Today I'm going to be going for the Platinum Trophy in Elden Rings. There's a total of 42 trophies I have to collect, including the Platinum. Almost all of them being tied to boss fights, which start out pretty easy, but they get way harder later on in the game. There's even a boss later on that some people consider to be the hardest in all of gaming. But before getting into any of the real bosses, I'll have to start at the very beginning. The game's starting area is called Limgrave, and unlike most other story games, there's no missions for me to do, so I just started exploring around the world. I didn't know much going into this game, but one thing I did know is that you're supposed to go around the world and fight all the bosses. So I went out and killed a few of the smaller bosses in the game without too much trouble. While out exploring, I spoke to this girl named Melina at a site of grace. She is kind of like the guide in this game and helps you out along your journey. And she took me to the main hub area of this game called the Round Table, and I got my first trophy. I really didn't have any clue what I was supposed to be doing, so I ended up looking up some stuff online. I found this video on a early game rune farm to get myself started out with a decent amount of levels. And if you guys did not know, in this game, runes are how you level up. You get a certain amount of runes and then you can spend it on a certain attribute to level, and it does get a lot harder to level up later on. After that, I was feeling a lot stronger, so I went back to the start of the game to take on my first real boss called the Tree Sentinel. A lot of people struggle with this boss and sometimes even quit the game because of it, but that's because you fight it right away and you're not actually supposed to do that. You're supposed to go out and explore and then come back to him later once you're stronger with more gear. So since I was so over leveled after doing that rune farm, I made pretty quick work of him. I wasn't really liking my current weapon, so I went out exploring and searched for a better one. I eventually came across an Everjail, which is basically just a boss arena that you can't use any summons in. The boss inside of this arena was giving me a lot of trouble though, and it took me well over 10 tries until I finally beat him. I eventually did beat him, and I got one of the most OP early game swords in the game, the Bloodhound Fang. After getting my new sword, I felt that I was ready to start taking on some of the main story bosses in the game. The story bosses always award a trophy after you beat them, so that's what I'm going to be going for right now. I made my way through all of the defenses up to Margit's arena, and I got ready to fight her. Margit is only the first main story boss, so he really isn't that tough, but he did end up killing me one time. But during the next attempt, I started using my weapon's special ability that makes you partially invincible whenever you do it. So I'm sure you guys can see why this weapon is so good early game. And after my second try, I did end up beating him and got that trophy for it. After Margit, the next main story boss I have to defeat is Godric the Grafted. The path to his arena is really straightforward and easy to get to after Margit's fight, so I just went straight for him. And if you ask me, I think Godric's easier than Margit. He does have two phases though, the first one being super easy with his slow, easily dodgeable attacks, but in his second stage he actually does get his dragon on his arm, but if you have a good enough weapon you can just roll right under it and kill him pretty easily. So after beating Godric, I of course got another trophy, and I also got something called a Great Rune. In Elden Ring, Great Runes boost your stats for a short period of time, but only when you use a rune arc. I never really interacted with the Great Rune feature in my playthrough, mainly because I was never bothered to go to a tower to restore them. After beating Godric, I unlocked a new area of the map called the Liurnia. This whole biome is pretty much just a swamp with some hills on the side and a big school in the middle. But the entrance to the school is locked, so I'm gonna have to go find a key to be able to get in. And I'm pretty sure there's multiple different keys to get past these doors, but the one I did is by defeating a little dragon mini boss and then getting the key from his den. And I just want to say how much I hate doing dragon bosses in this game. The main reason for this is whenever you're fighting them, they're usually huge and the camera always just bugs out and the hitboxes are really weird. And once you actually start landing some hits, if their arena is open enough for them to fly away, they almost always do. And almost all the dragon fights overall are just really tedious to do. But after about 30 minutes and 5 different tries, I did finally beat this dragon and grabbed the key from his den and made my way up to the school. And this part of the map is pretty much just a straight path until the final boss, with a little mini boss along the way that I did defeat for another trophy. After exploring the area a little bit more, I eventually made it to the final boss of the area, Renala. One of my friends actually quit this game because of the boss fight that I'm about to do, so I was a little bit worried going in. But I really didn't have much trouble with her. Her first phase being really easy. I really find it hard to believe that people have any trouble with this phase at all. The second phase is where some of the challenge comes in, but I guess maybe I got lucky with her summons, but I didn't have any trouble with her, and I beat her on my first or second try. Once she died, I got 2 trophies, one for defeating her and one for restoring a Great Rune. So after doing a lot of the main story bosses, I decided I was going to go back and do some of the easier mini bosses, and I got another 2 trophies for beating them. I also got one of my first legendary weapons, which we're going to need a lot of for a trophy later on. I also started out Ronnie's questline because we're going to have to complete that to get the full moon ending trophy for the game. After progressing far enough through Ronnie's questline, I made it to my next main story boss, Radon. The Radon fight for me was actually really easy due to the fact that you can summon an entire army to help you kill him. So I beat him pretty easily, not on my first try, but I beat him pretty quick. And after the fight, I got my next trophy. Right after you beat Radon, all the stars start shooting down onto the map and a huge meteor hits and opens up the underground portion, which is where I went to. While I was down there, I ran into one of the easiest bosses in the game and made pretty quick work of him. And I even got a trophy for beating him. A little deeper into the underground city was probably one of the most OP items in the entire game, the Mimic Tier Ashes. These basically just let you summon in a clone of yourself to help you with all your boss fights. But the OP part is it actually has better stats than you do and a lot more health. Overall, they just make all the boss fights in the game considerably easier. So I grabbed that out of the chest, and that was our first legendary Ash of War that we're going to need for a trophy later on in the game. Afterwards, I went back to the round table hold to upgrade it to +6. After that, I turned on this huge elevator to be able to access the top part of the map. The reason I did this was to progress a questline that I was working on to get access to Mogwin's Palace. The reason I wanted to go there is because the most popular and efficient rune farm is located there. I eventually did make my way to the Mogwin Palace part of the map and did this rune farm for a good 4 hours straight to get myself over leveled. There is a main story boss here, but I'm not going to be ready to take him on until much later on. I went back to the Eternal City and took on my personal least favorite boss in the entire game, the Valiant Gargoyle duo fight. And I think you guys probably know, if you've played this game, why I hate this boss fight so much. It starts out okay with the 1v1 with the Gargoyle, but once he gets to half health, he summons in another one, and it's just really hard to juggle between 2 different bosses at once. This boss fight is actually the main reason I did that rune farm and grabbed the Mimic tier, because of how much trouble I was having with it. But after a while, I finally did beat them, and I got a trophy for it. After that was over, I went out and did 2 more easy bosses, and I got 2 more trophies. After that fight, I grabbed the final Ghost Glovewort that I needed and finally maxed out my Mimic tier. And then I finally finished out Ronnie's questline and beat this boss along the way for a trophy. And at the end, I collected another legendary weapon for later. Also got one of my favorite armor sets in the whole game at the end of the quest, so I'm definitely going to be rocking that for pretty much the whole rest of this video. After finally finishing all that side stuff with Ronnie, I was ready to start doing some more main story bosses. Before I do that, I have to gain access to the capital city, and to do that, I have to take out the Draconic Tree Sentinel. This is basically just a buffed up version of the Tree Sentinel before, so I didn't have much trouble with him. Once I started progressing through the capital city, I eventually came across my next main boss, Godfrey, but this was more of just like a ghost version of him, because we don't actually fight Godfrey until later on. I ended up beating him on my first try for my next trophy. Pretty much right after him is the next main story boss, Morgoth. Just like the Tree Sentinel, this is basically just Margit from earlier on in the game, but with a lot more abilities and more powerful. But I guess I might have done a little too much of that rune farm, because I didn't even have to swing my weapon during this fight. My Mimic tier did it all by himself, and I guess that just shows how OP that summon is. But once Morgoth went down, I did get a trophy for doing that. I made my way past the capital city into the mountaintop of the giants. Afterwards, I took out 2 more easy bosses for another 2 trophies. Instead of going through the mountaintops of the giants right now, I decided to instead head over to the Volcano Manor part of the map and fight the next main story boss, Frykard. Now there's multiple different ways to get to the manor. The way I chose is to help out this girl get her necklace back, and she teleports you to the manor. Once I was there, I wasn't able to fight the boss just yet. I had to do a couple of quests for them until they finally teleported me to the boss arena. This boss arena was really cool looking, and I was a little worried whenever I loaded in and saw just how huge the boss was. But this is one of the only boss fights in the game where they actually just give you the best way to take him out right at the start of the boss arena. So I beat him on my first try without any trouble and got another trophy for it. I went back to the capital, and underneath there's a whole sewer system that you need to traverse to get these 2 trophies. And it is by far the worst part of this platinum run. The main reason for this is because Elden Ring was not meant to be a parkour game, and this whole area is just a dark maze with a lot of hidden jump. But finally, at the end of all of it, I found my next boss, Moog the Omen, and got another trophy for taking him out. And while I was down in the sewers, I set up the Frenzy Flame ending for later on. After going through those sewer systems for hours, I was ready to get back to some boss fights. And the next one for me to do was the Fire Giant. His first phase was pretty easy, he just kind of ran around and didn't use any of his fire powers on me. But his second phase is where he really started to get challenging. He whipped out all kinds of fire powers, but after a couple of attempts, I did finally beat him for another trophy. Right after I finished the fight, I went over to the forge in his arena and set fire to the Erd tree. This got me another trophy, and I was also teleported to the next area of the game, Faramazula. As soon as I got to Faramazula, I pretty much left right away. The reason I did this is because if you progress the story too far, you'll actually lock yourself out of some items and soft lock yourself from the platinum. So I went back to the main part of the map and grabbed some missable items. While I was there, I also beat the Dragon King Soldier boss for another trophy. I also went back to the Ancestral Woods part of the map and beat another Ancestor Spirit, but I guess this one was different because I got another trophy for it. And finally, I went back to Volcano Manor, cleaned up some stuff, and beat the Godskin Noble. Once I got all the missable items out of the way, I went back to Faramazula and took out the Godskin Duo. This is just like the Godskin Noble fight from before, but with another guy in the mix. I heard a lot of bad things about how hard this fight was, but I personally didn't have much trouble with it. I think it was mainly because I brought my Mimic tier with me and the attention of both bosses was evenly divided between us. I actually took these guys out on my first try for another trophy. The next boss fight, however, was one of, if not the hardest for me to beat. I gave it about 10 tries, but eventually I had to go back to the mainland and hunt down the rest of the Somber Smithing Stones to increase my damage. So that's what I did. I went back to the round table and maxed out my weapon, earning me another trophy. But once I got my new plus 10 Bloodhound Fang, Malekith didn't really stand much of a chance against me. I ended up beating him on my first try back and got the trophy for it. But when I came back from Faramazula, the Erd tree was fully on fire now, and the capital was filled with ash. That's actually the reason why I had to go back earlier and collect some things, because a lot of things disappear in the capital once you do this. After making my way back through the capital for a second time, I came across the same arena that I fought Morgott in a little bit earlier on, but this time instead of Morgott, it had Godfrey in it. But me and my Mimic made pretty quick work of him because we were still pretty over leveled at this point, and I beat him on my first try for another trophy. And at this point, if I wasn't going for the Platinum Trophy, I could have just ended the game because that was the last necessary boss that I had to beat to do that. But I still had to go around and collect a lot more things and beat a lot more bosses before I could get this Platinum. So that's what I started to do. First, I collected all of the legendary Ashen Remains for this trophy. Along the way, I also killed Beretta, Knight of the Halig Tree, for another trophy. Next, I finished gathering the remaining legendary weapons that I needed for another trophy. And then I went out to kill Dragon Lord Placidusax. And if I didn't watch a guide on how to get to this boss fight, I would have never figured it out. But the boss fight itself wasn't that hard, and I beat him for another trophy. I went out and collected the few magic items that I still needed to for the legendary magic items trophy. And finally, killed a couple small bosses to get the last talismans that I needed for the legendary talisman trophy. After that grind was over with, I went back to Mogwin's palace and fought the Lord of Blood. If you guys remember, this is the same boss from earlier that I avoided because it was too low level. But now that I'm fighting him, I probably should have just fought him back then because I killed him so quick he didn't even get to his second stage. And I avoided it for as long as I possibly could, but it was finally time for me to fight Melania. I remember before I started playing this game, I'd seen so many people rage quit over this fight. It really put me off starting the game for a while, because I didn't think I was going to be good enough to beat her. I did give it one shot with my current build, but that did not go well, and I died almost immediately. So instead of grinding it out with my current stuff, I decided to look up a guide on how to make the best build for her. Shout out to this guy for the build. So I did end up fully respecking my character just for the one boss, but it was definitely worth it. Once I got back to the arena, using this guy's build and strategy, I ended up beating her on my first try back for another trophy. and now it was finally time for me to finish up this game. So I made my way back to the Erd Tree and started up the final fight. Just like many other fights in this game, this one had two phases to it. The first one being against Radagon, and the second phase being against the Elden Beast. The first phase was pretty easy for me, but the Elden Beast fight was a lot harder. Mainly because of some of the attacks he had, like this one where he just aimbots you with shooting stars, but also because of how big his arena is. It just felt like I was chasing him around the whole time. But after a couple of attempts, I ended up beating him. So instead of playing through the game another 2 times, I just did the cloud save trick on PlayStation to get all 3 ending trophies. But I did still have to play through about half of the game again because of a mistake I made earlier locking me out of a trophy boss. But I didn't really mind going back through some of the early stuff again because of how much I enjoyed that part of the game. And after about 5.5 hours of starting my New Game Plus playthrough, I made it back to the boss. I beat him on my first try and earned the final trophy I needed, and afterwards finally got the Platinum Trophy for Elden Ring. It ended up taking me a total of 44 hours to get the Platinum Trophy. If you guys have any suggestions on the next game I should go for, leave a comment down below. And if you made it all the way to the end, make sure to leave a like and subscribe.